It's not that funny. I've been using that joke for years. Anyway, Mixed Marriage, Jazz and the Post-Klezmer Revolution in New York City. I'm, by the way, very happy to have Louis Porter returning here for, how many times have you been here? Like about
I don't know.
times?
It could be 10.
Like you're an institution here.
I'm afraid so.
And a source of great joy, and Klezmer is joyous, so. I'm not going to give a real long speech, you know, just give as much money as you can, and we are existing, and we need money. But take a look at the exhibit on the wall. This is The Matter of Time. It's going to be up till the 30th of January, and it accompanied this incredible panel, roundtable we did, on the subject, a very huge subject, which a lot was said about, brilliant stuff. It's all on lunch. You go to our site, go to past programming, you can see, it's up now, isn't it, Adam? Yeah. The Time Roundtable is up. And it is amazing. When you see it again, it's even more amazing because there was a lot of very dense, poetic, and scientific observation in that particular panel. And the panelists were really talking to each other, which is really an interesting phenomenon when human beings do that. There's two other programs that I want to bring to your attention. On the 23rd of this month, January, we're really thrilled to be showing the next film by Gary Husvet, Objectification. Now, he's the filmmaker who did Helvetica. About typography. It was an enormous success. It was an enormous success at Philoctetes. And Gary will be here on the 23rd with the design guru and professor at SVA, Steve Heller, interviewing him afterwards. And so that's a very exciting event. We're very honored to have the film. And then I'm just calling your attention to a couple of major events for us, because in the month of February, we'll be showing a film that was actually made by Joseph Cornell. That will probably be the world premiere of that film that the Museum of Modern Art is collaborating with us on. And we're going to have an amazing roundtable about that. And we want you to all come to that and we'll let you know about that. So go look at our site, be aware of our programming, and just go to philoctetes.org, and there's the calendar of events, and that will give you more details on all of that. But again, the 23rd at 2:30 will be Objectification. Now I'm pleased to present Louis Porter. I mean, this guy does everything. He's omnivorous. He's a polymath. Are you a polyglot also?
Maybe, no.
But he's a professor. In addition, he teaches. He finds time to teach in the midst of making music at Rutgers, where he's director of the master's program in jazz history. He's the author of 6 books, including an acclaimed study of John Coltrane. And Louis has brought CDs to sell today.
And Greg as well.
And Greg too. So they're all, and this is Dharma Jazz.
Some people were asking about when this would be out.
It's out, it's here, and you should buy these.
It has that tune,
wonderful
Gamelan,
CDs.
I performed here about 1,000 times.
Great. So take it away.
I'll introduce you after the first.
I'll move this.
One. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
saxophone player, as you can see. He's also an Orthodox rabbi at the 6th Street Community Synagogue right here in Manhattan. He started there, I think, on your birthday.
No, that was the installation.
That was the installation.
It started September 1st.
Oh, it started September 1st. Okay, and it had an installation ceremony on his birthday, which is end of October. And should I tell him your age?
Sure.
That was his 50th. That's a milestone. And I guess we've known each other probably about 20 years since the day when he took a jazz history class with me during the days that he was studying at Rutgers. And for some reason, he decided to stay friends with me after that. But
that's because he gave me a job.
I had him teach some undergraduate courses. But talk about multifaceted. I mean, this gentleman is very multifaceted and a great musician as well. And actually, he's going to be running a lot of the show today. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You can talk about what we played, what we will play, the past, the future, the present, and anything else that's on your mind.
Okay, great.
Greg Wall.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I don't know if you know who your host is today, but Louis is really exceptional. I mean, I attended New England Conservatory of Music, and it turns out that Louis and I were in Boston at the same time. We didn't really know each other so well, but it was a real first to have an accomplished musician also be a musicologist in jazz. It really had never been done before. So he sort of really raised the whole bar for jazz scholarship.
It fell on top of me after I raised it.
And so it's really a thrill to be collaborating with Louis here today. I sort of stumbled into this Jewish awareness later on in life, and I'd always looked at music as a spiritual release. And as things heated up in New York, and I guess through the course of the afternoon I'll divulge a little more of the story. Some parts of it are interesting. It started to affect my music profoundly. So anyway, we just started off with an old Yiddish theater tune, Tumbal Lake, I'm sure you remember. And it's like, the type of musical language that was formulated here in New York in the early 60s by musicians like John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner and Elvin Jones.
And the way we approached it, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny, there's one of my favorite quotes is from Jelly Roll Morton, where he talked about, he said that jazz is not a kind of music, it's a way to play music. And so I feel that way with a lot of different genres. And one of the great things about being a musician in New York at the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st century is that we have so many people who have so much global exposure. And I guess maybe, the musicologists in 10 or 20 years will call it just, postmodernism in jazz or something like that. But it's just, you get to meet a lot of interesting people who are all experts in different kind of music, and we love just blending them together. Now, our predecessors never had access to so much great musical information. So it was only natural when people started getting interested in klezmer music, starting in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a rebirth of traditional Jewish folk music that today is called klezmer. Back then, in the day, it was just called Jewish wedding music or Jewish folk music. And a klezmer was someone you didn't want your daughter to marry, an itinerant musician. Now, klezmer is a real genre, and I think that, it's not going to be long until you see a Grammy category in klezmer music.
I hope so.
Which is funny. And by the way, the Klezmatics, who are one of the best-known klezmer bands, got a Grammy last year, but for doing a record that's not klezmer music. So
Really?
Go figure, yeah.
What's the name?
It's called Wonder Wheel. They found some songs that Woody Guthrie wrote, or some lyrics, and they wrote their own music to it, but not klezmer at all. Nice record, yeah. And I'm glad they got some attention. Anyway, I know anecdotally a lot of you came here because you like klezmer music. A bunch of people came at the beginning and said, oh, I love klezmer music. Well, this program is not really about klezmer music, but the title, The Mixed Marriage, jazz and what is it? Whatever the title is.
Yeah, you made
I
it.
made it up, but you know.
Very good title.
Anyway, it's about the influence of klezmer music in jazz. That's the mixed marriage we're speaking of today. But just so everybody will go home happy, or at least feel, I figure we'll play a little klezmer music now. And by the way, there must be a few people here who are not familiar with klezmer music at all. I hope there are. As I said before, it's only recent that it's become art music. It was traditionally folk music, instrumental Jewish folk music coming from the Eastern European tradition. And the most popular venue for klezmer music was at a wedding, a simcha, a celebration. Working class people didn't have a lot of time to go dancing or go partying, so when they had a wedding, that was their opportunity to do it. Before we play this, I'll tell you one of my favorite personal experiences. I was playing at a festival in Berlin about 10 years ago, and the final night of the festival in Berlin was at the big opera house, and there were about 6 different artists on the bill. I was playing with my group Hasidic New Wave, and also on the bill was a klezmer band called the Epstein Brothers. The Epstein Brothers were very, very big in the New York wedding scene in the 50s and 60s. They were the first American-born klezmorim, and they learned from the European immigrants. They were a little younger than people like Dave Taras and Naftali Brandwein. So this was their first concert in Europe. And here are the Epstein Brothers. One of them was very sick, but the 3 of them, they were 4 brothers, and 3 were there. And they're backstage, and they can't believe there are 2,000 people in tuxedos at this gala event. And they said, you know, back in the day, people wouldn't pay you 2 cents to hear this music. They couldn't get over it. But it's true. And if you go to a Jewish wedding today, especially among the Orthodox who take their weddings very seriously, you're not going to hear klezmer music. You haven't heard klezmer music at a traditional religious wedding in quite a few decades. Now it's basically rock music with lyrics coming from Jewish sources. Anyway, we're going to give you a little taste of some traditional klezmer music, and this is a little medley with 3 pieces that each have a different function at a wedding. So the first big function a klezmer musician would play is to play music to honor the bride, the kala, before the chuppah, before the ceremony. And sometimes they call it a kala bezetzen. The kala is going to sit down. It's a musical form called a doina. It's a free improvisational piece. And then this will lead to a form called a jacques, and it's a Romanian rhythm in 3 that was commonly used to escort the chassan, the groom, and the kala down to the chuppah. And then we'll finish with a freilach, which is music that people would dance to. Okay. So the medley of the doina, jacques, and freilach.
to tell them that dancing is allowed. We forgot to tell them.
Yeah, lots of room for that.
Lots of room for that. Right over here. Any questions? We take questions here and there as we go along before we go to our next number. But it wasn't just to leave them satisfied, because there's a very real point to hearing the traditional klezmer before we go off to some of the other stuff you're doing, you know?
So it's fun. It's fun music, though. You know, it just catches everybody. But there's a lot going on there. Now, I came to that music later on in life, not as relatively later on, because I did grow up hearing around the house. My grandparents were all born in the United States and became assimilated very quickly. I mean, that was really their ideal, is, you know, just fit in, become Americans. So aside from, you know, a 10-minute horror at my bar mitzvah, I didn't really, and which, you know, was not really klezmer music. And I think in those days, this was, you know, in a very, you know, bar mitzvah, 1972. There's a lot of Israeli music, but you didn't really hear much klezmer music at all. But I was a student at New England Conservatory of Music when one day there was a big sign on Beethoven. We had a big statue of Beethoven, and that was sort of the meeting place. If you wanted to get in touch with people, this was before texting or cell phones. So you put a sign on Beethoven, big, huge Beethoven, just put a sign up and tape it to Beethoven. And one day there's a sign on Beethoven. It said, "Who wants to be in a klezmer band? Show up at the Keller Room 2 o'clock on Thursday." I mean, no one had ever heard of that before. So it turns out that one of the faculty members, Henkes Netsky, had discovered klezmer music and decided he wanted to start an ensemble to learn it. So at the time, I was busy. I had just started a group to learn traditional New Orleans music. Jelly Roll Morton and Sidney Bechet and Jimmy Noon and Johnny Dawes, all the heroes of New Orleans. So I was deep into that. But a lot of friends of mine became members of this ensemble. And they, that ensemble, which is now called the Klezmer Conservatory Band, started copying records. You know, good musicians usually get that way because they learn to imitate, just like everybody learns to speak by imitating their parents. Musicians learn to speak by imitating their musical parents. And by taking these old, scratchy records recorded in the 20s and 30s and, you know, slowing them down if they had to and being able to recreate them, they started to learn the language very well. So the sound, and there were a few other groups like that at the time. And after a while, the sounds of klezmer music became prevalent. People started to hear them. I started checking it out a little later, and based on my interest in learning to play the clarinet. I think, well, that's a good way to do it because the music is so clarinet heavy. And various musical elements just sort of became part of my musical identity. So when I switched to a saxophone, it's going to sound completely different because I'm a jazz saxophone player. But I was able to, and not just me, but a lot of other people who had similar mutual interests in jazz and improvised music and in old Jewish folk music, were able to take some of these elements and incorporate them into jazz music. So when I take the tenor saxophone, I play something like that Doina that we started off with. You're in the death seat, I think they call that seat.
She loved it. She loved it.
And in a jazz context, it's just another way of expressing yourself. You know, that's always been a premium on jazz performance, is coming up with a new way to express yourself that sets you apart from the crowd. And you know, Lewis will tell you the same thing. Our favorite players are what we call like the 2-second guys. In 2 seconds, you know who it is. Because no one else sounds like them. They have something that they do. They get a sound out of their instrument. Even if it's a piano, you might think, well, you press the note on a piano, but you know, a great pianist has their own sound. And an instrument like this, which is controlled by the breath, and you can do a lot of things in terms of just controlling the pitch. a klezmer device, but in jazz, it has a different, different kind of power to it. So anyway, it wasn't long before we started writing music, jazz music, that took some of the elements of music. And one of the things that makes klezmer sound like klezmer, of course, is the beat, the groove. And there's this overriding sort of implied syncopation that's usually counted like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Try it. Down to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, down, down, down. And on top of that, we check and that gets people up to dance. Sometimes you can think of it as long, short, long, short, long, long, short, long, short, long. So that's like a basic fundamental rhythm of klezmer music. If you start playing that rhythm, pretty much anything that you play is going to sound like klezmer music. Because it's so strong. And really, rhythm is at the, as our old colleague Roswell Rudd used to say, rhythm is king. Rhythm is everything. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in klezmer music, too. The harmonies that are used, the scales that are used. That's probably one of the most pronounced things, aside from there, is the scales. We're not using exclusively major and minor scales or the traditional church modes as we do in Western music. There's an Eastern element to it by having a lowered or a raised fourth degree sometimes. And if you invert that scale and start it on a different note, you get this scale. Same notes, different starting note, and it has a completely different sound to it. So anyway, I wrote a piece that was sort of a combination of two things that I really like: the sound of early 1970s modal electric jazz, as exemplified by Miles Davis, and the scalar and rhythmic elements of klezmer melody. So I put this together, and we're going to play it for you right now.
And have you recorded this one?
I've recorded this, and I recorded this on my latest record, actually, on Sodic Records, called Ha'orot, which is based on, it's based on the poetry of Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, who was the first chief rabbi of Israel, and he died in 1935.
A lot of people know that name.
Okay. Yeah, he was an incredible figure because he was a serious theologian and a Talmudic scholar, but he was also a poet. And jumping ahead many years, when I became interested in Jewish texts and became a rabbi, the idea of a serious scholar who was also an artist really appealed to me, because it spoke to both sides of me. So anyway, we recorded a bunch of his poetry, not writing songs, but keeping the poetry intact, and then composing pieces to accompany the poetry. So I had been wanting something to do with this piece for many years, and finally it fit, and we recorded it on this record. So anyway.
Great. Give me a tempo again. so far? Yes, sir.
Would you say this music had an effect on Benny Goodman?
Not really.
The klezmer?
I don't think so.
Because I hear it too.
Yeah.
Well-
He played an occasional piece in the style, but I think what you're saying is when he was playing the jazz pieces, you don't hear it.
No, I don't. He wasn't really in that world. Now it's funny because he played a trumpet player in his band, Ziggy Elman, played klezmer music. He knew it, and I guess you could correct me. You're the historian, but I believe that Ziggy Elman brought in this Dave Tarras piece that. And then
Right.
they did it. It was a big hit for him, Slow it down, add some English words, and that was an authentic old klezmer piece.
But
It of course
Goodman was-
became "And the Angels Sing." And Johnny Mercer wrote some words for that. Who wrote those?
I don't remember who wrote the words,
Yeah,
but
but it was a big,
That's it.
big
Yeah.
hit. And then, of course, the band on the original version of that, they go into this klezmer section. Here's Ziggy Elman.
Exactly.
He knew that. He knew.
he
But,
plays it beautifully. But Goodman really was more into, other than
Classical,
jazz, his
yeah.
big thing was
Oh, yeah,
classical
yeah,
music.
yeah.
And of course, he recorded a lot of classical music eventually.
Now, there was a great musician who was bilingual, a guy named Sam Musiker. He played with Gene Krupa's orchestra. And
Saxophone and clarinet.
yeah. Now, he married Dave Tarras's daughter. Dave Tarras was born I believe in the Ukraine, and he
one of the
came
famous
here
klezmer
in
clarinets of
the
all time.
second decade. He is considered one of the triumvirate of European-born klezmer clarinetists who came to the United States and became big recording stars, relatively big in the Jewish world. Of course, he played dance music. That's how he made his living. But he was a great musician, and he used to play for the radio shows as well. In fact, some of my favorite recordings of radio shows were the Yiddish American Hour. It was on WHN Radio. And Living Traditions, I think, has put out a bunch of CDs. And there was that Yiddish Radio Project on NPR. If you go on NPR and look up Yiddish Radio Project, you can hear some of these recordings. And there was a house band led by a guy named Sam Medoff, who was a pianist, and Dave Tarras was a clarinet player. Here was a guy who could work and do shows. He could play on, he played on Second Avenue. And then for an immigrant with an accent, it was harder to get work on Broadway. It was a different kind of scene, but there was such a vibrant Jewish scene that he was able to, to make his mark. So anyway, his son-in-law was a great jazz musician and a great klezmer musician. And he really was bilingual. And if you listen to some of his recordings,
Like musically bilingual.
yeah, there's a record that was called Tanz. It's been reissued on, I think on Columbia, and TANTZ exclamation point. And it's got Sam Musiker together with his father-in-law, Dave Tarras, and Sam's brother, Ray, who was still alive and well and playing klezmer music, one of the greats.
I have that on LP.
Yeah,
And Sam's son, I believe, is Lee Musiker, the pianist.
that's Ray's son.
Ray's son.
Ray's
okay.
son, yeah, Lee Musiker, who was a brilliant jazz pianist, and
He's accompanied Tony Bennett and all kinds
yeah,
of
yeah, it's
players.
great.
Is that right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's terrific.
So anyway, Benny Goodman, no, it's to my ears, but and even if he did, I don't think what I know about Benny, I don't think he would have admitted it. if he
He's
was-
funny. He had a little bit of an elitist thing about that.
Yeah, yeah. But the last piece that we played, I hope you could hear the klezmer influence in it, but it definitely was modern jazz. So this is something that I think is representative of a truly New York experience, something that would only be possible here at this particular time of the existence of the world, to have all the stars aligning just right, to have all people who have these elements together. And when you're playing in a group with people who are informed by klezmer music and have heard those Miles Davis records we were talking about before, and also know about funk and rock and roll and classical music and new wild improv, you get some amazing types of sounds coming up. But this Jewish element now is something that's here to stay. there are many, many groups today who are writing music with this klezmer influence. And many of these musicians are not Jewish and have no connection with this other than hearing it in the work of people like myself or my peers who started now is something that's here to stay. There are many, many groups today who are writing music with this klezmer influence. And many of these musicians are not Jewish and have no connection with this other than hearing it in the work of people like myself or my peers who started recording this music in the early 90s, this hybrid, this mixed marriage music. So,
Which, speaking of which, you have something here called Hasidic Waltz that we're going to do next.
oh, okay. Very nice. Now this, we're going to do an abrupt change. Now, the influence in my work is more than just klezmer music. I had the great fortune through a bizarre turn of events, and if we ever get a chance to have a cup of coffee together, or you come to one of my lectures at my synagogue, I'm the rabbi of the community synagogue on 6th Street in the East Village. It's on East 6th between 1st and 2nd. By the way, I play music every Monday night at 9 o'clock there. You're all welcome. And the kosher living class is at 7 o'clock. That's free. The jazz is a $10 cover charge. But in the mid-'80s, the early 80s, I had just come to New York from New England Conservatory to seek my fortune as a jazz musician. And by some bizarre turn of events, I ended up playing in catering halls in Williamsburg and Borough Park, Brooklyn, playing for weddings of Hasidim. And I saw a part of the Jewish community that most people never get to see. I mean, we all see Hasidim in New York. If you walk around 47th Street, you see guys with black coats and hats and beards. But to be able to go and celebrate their most poignant moments of the life with them is really incredible. And there was a completely different world of music that I was exposed to. And not only that, but the way people related to music. You know, you always heard about how people in West African culture had music so embedded into their life that they couldn't go about their lives without music. Well, I think a great deal the Hasidic community is like that too, that they have this music that is important for certain rituals and for certain parts of the whole life cycle. So I got to see that, and I was a big fan of a lot of the music. The bands that were playing the music were not so inspiring, but the music itself was very, very inspiring. More on that later, but right now we're going to give you a performance of a melody that comes from the Stolener Hasidim, and it is something that's traditionally sung at the end of the Sabbath as the sun is going down on Saturday afternoon. And the tradition is that people would go and sit at the tish, the big table of the Rebbe, of the rabbi, and all his Hasidim would be, and they're holding on to the Sabbath for dear life. They don't want it to go. And they would find a spiritual melody, often composed by the rabbi himself or, rabbinic royalty, so to speak, and sing this song over and over and over again, holding on to the Sabbath. And this is a very beautiful piece. I recorded it on my first CD on Tzaddik Records called Later Prophets. And it's our Stolener Nigun, Nigun as they call it there. right.
I was looking for that repeat. That just threw me off. We did.
All right. Isn't that a beautiful tune? It's a real, I love that. I love that. Now, there's a real jazz element, never mind anything, because Louis and I have never played any of this music together before. So, you're getting it really, really. You know, some of the greatest jazz recordings of all time were made that way. Someone came in, here's the music, let's go and play. They just show up, you know.
Kind of blues on that.
But with Hasidic vocal music, it's all about the power of melody. Now, as opposed to klezmer music, which is Jewish instrumental music, Hasidic nigunim are vocal music. They're meant to be sung, and oftentimes there are no words at all. And the Hasidic masters like to say that words come to an end. They're finite. But a melody with no words doesn't have to stop. It can keep going. And a very essential Jewish perspective of the world is that our lives are not a circle, even though you might think that because the calendar, every time we roll around and it's the fall, we're going to have Rosh Hashanah, but it's a spiral. And it's just a series of concentric circles, and they're just expanding and expanding. And the nigun is like that. And there are times when people can take one of these melodies and sing them for what seems like hours, but for an awful long time, and it's very, very powerful. And to people who are in the right frame of mind, the experience is deeper than any drug they could possibly take. I'm serious. Now, I have firsthand story to report, not with the drugs. I'm not going to report that.
Don't get excited.
There was no drug use in the 70s. It's complete unsubstantiated.
Most people don't remember the 70s. That's what a guy said to me once.
I was once playing.
My friend, what's he talking about? He said he was so high, he just doesn't remember the 70s. Oh. I didn't know what he was talking about. Well, I was too young to remember. That's another thing.
So one night I was playing at a Hasidic wedding in Williamsburg, and there must have been, there were easily over 600 people at this wedding. The men and women were in separate rooms. And I'm playing, and this, I remember, I'll never forget this, because it was the longest continuous set of music that I played. At a Hasidic wedding, when they come out and start to dance, it's one long medley. And they go from one song to the next and the next. And some of them are based on texts. And a lot of, as I told you, the new songs really feel like rock and roll, but they've got usually maybe 4 or 5 Hebrew words that are repeated over and over and over again. But this particular night, the Hasidim were very, very into traditional Hasidic music. So we were playing a lot of these melodies that I was unfamiliar with. And then, you know, they had sheet music, and we played them, and it kept going on and on. And after about 65, 70 minutes, my lips were starting to scream. I mean, there's no stopping. And it wasn't like a big band where I could lay out, the trombone section would take over. It was just me and the band leader, who was the trumpet player. And he was out of shape anyway, so most of the time he wasn't playing. I was just playing nonstop. After about 75 minutes, all the musicians were going like, damn, we're going to strangle you. Stop already. 90 minutes. Finally, he signals us to stop. We stopped playing. The Hasidim keep dancing. They were singing another melody. They weren't even listening to us. I'm serious. And, but it illustrated an amazing phenomenon. The power of melody. Because the melody they were singing, they were no longer in Brooklyn. They were someplace else. And I'll tell you, I was so inspired by that I wanted to be there. You know, I wanted to, listen, music is my whole life. And, you know, when things feel good, you have a good read, you know, and the musician, everything feels good. All right, you feel really good. You feel on top of your game. But I had never felt like that before. So, my friend Frank London, who was, might have even been with me that night, we went to school together, New England Conservatory. We decided that we wanted to try to have our own relationship with these melodies, but in a context that we understood, with players that we understood. Because I couldn't really relate to oompa, 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 oompa all night. You know, it was. Oh, okay. Very good. Okay. So we started this project that became the band Hasidic New Wave, and we were formed for the first radical Jewish culture tour that the Knitting Factory put on. At that time, the Knitting Factory was sort of the focal point for this new Jewish music that was coming. And there weren't that many groups doing it. On this tour was Hasidic New Wave. There was a group from the Bay Area out west called the Post-Klezmer Trio, wonderful group. It was a rock and roll band called God Is My Co-Pilot, which was sort of a punk Yiddish type of group. And the guitar player, who I really like, his name was Craig Flanagan, he used to tune his guitar loose. All the strings were just loose. And he got these amazing sounds out of it. And we were flushing out this whole idea of the language. And I wanted to share with you part of the experience of being able to use these as points of departure. You really have to be familiar with it first. So I want to, if you'll indulge me, I want to share one of my favorite Hasidic nigunim. It comes from the tradition of the Satmar Hasidim, who come from Hungary. Their headquarters are in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. There's also a large Satmar community in Monroe, New York. You know, right? And Satmar is actually a very, very large Hasidic group. It's one of the largest. But they pretty much, they keep to themselves, unlike other Hasidic groups which are very involved in outreach or something like this. The Satmar, if you're not lucky enough to get invited to a Satmar wedding, you're not going to hear this music. So anyway, this is a melody that was composed to use at the holiday of Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is at the very end of the Sukkot festival. And it is traditional to have 7 dances carrying the Torah around the bima in the synagogue. And each one of those is called a hakafa. It's a circle. So this is called a hakafa nigun. Okay? Why don't you give me a G minor?
Oops, sorry. That's a different sound. Give me just a second.
Okay, so the first part, it's in 3 parts. First part goes like this. Nai, 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 nai. Nai, 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 nai. Now you can sing nai, you can sing la, you can sing die, you can get ay, ay, ay. What is this? Today's like an ay, ay, ay day, right? Okay. Ay, 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 ay. Okay, now there's an answer to it. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Back to the first part. Ay, 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 ay. This time the answer is going to go down. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Let's put it together. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Feels good, doesn't it? It's nice to sing. It's okay. Second part. Ay, 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 ay. A little tricky because it's got a nice interval in there. Ay, 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 ay. Good. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Here's the answer. Ay, 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 second part from the beginning. Ay, 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 ay. And again, the answer goes down. Ay, 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 ay. Second part. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Back to the beginning. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Okay, mix well and stir for an hour and a half. That's the third section, but we won't do that right now. Anyway, now you know this niggin. It's now part of you. You sung it. And now, what we wanted to do was to try to take this niggin and liberate it from the greasy catering halls and bring it into our own safe, experimental, freaky, who knows what's coming up next zone. And so anyway, Louis and I have never played this together before, but if we had come and played this and you had not had this experience, it would not mean what it's going to mean now. You'll have a relationship. And you don't have to have that experience to appreciate our music, but if you do, then you sort of have like an insider's perspective, and it's a little deeper level. It's sort of like, you read some writers who make all these literary references all the time. If you've actually read the books, you can enjoy it that much more. Or say, like, what pompous, anyway. But at least it gives you a different perspective. So here we go.
And we're going to play Fia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Going on at the same time, where the drums and bass would be playing in one tempo, and the guitar and the saxophone and trumpet would be playing in another one. It's kind of like something you hear on some Ornette Coleman recordings. So since there are only two of us, we're either going to play together or apart, probably mostly apart.
On purpose. I saw what you were thinking there.
Comments, questions? Yes, in the back, ma'am.
Would you say that part of the Klezmer music is cartoonish?
Definitely part of it. So,
This part that you just played over
Tell them what that is.
okay, chazanis in Yiddish or chazanut in Hebrew is a genre of cantorial music. And it's something, it's sort of like, to the Jewish people, it's like the blues. It's authentic, like the blues are to Americans. You know, the blues is really America's original art form. The blues could not have happened any other place except right here. And of course, it's the most influential genre of music in history.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we'd have no jazz, we'd have no gospel music, we'd have no R&B, we have nothing without the blues, rock
From
and roll.
Black American music, it's influenced everything. Tremendous.
So cantorial music is really an original Eastern European Jewish innovation, because Jews have been so migratory and have been so transient, picking up bits and pieces of different types of musical culture from wherever they lived. You couldn't really say this is authentic or this is authentic, but cantorial music really was authentic. Now it has elements of different things, and because a lot of the cantors were trained in operatic singing as well, so there was a sophistication of people who had studied Western music, but that blend was something that was unique. So the question was, is my music influenced by cantorial music? I'd have to say yes, only because I'm influenced by all the music that I've ever listened to more than once and enjoyed. And I like cantorial music very much. In fact, one of these recordings, I think this one, I recorded a version of a cantorial solo by the great Yossele Rosenblatt. And it was a part of the liturgy that comes from the Musaf service, the additional service that's sung on holidays. And the text is, Umipanei chate'enu, on account of our shortcomings, we live in exile. Umipanei chate'enu. And so Frank and I learned this solo by Yossele Rosenblatt exactly, note for note, inflection for inflection. He's a master of like putting these quarter tones in certain spots where he'll make a note just a little flat on purpose because that's the note he wants, not the note that's on the piano. And so we learned this, and then we came up with a musical canvas to put it on that had some really great textures. And our guitar player in Hasidic New Wave is a guy named Dave Fusinski, who's a master at textures of the guitar. I mean, just unbelievable. If you're not familiar with his work, check him out. Wow. And then also with a nice little groove that our bass player, Fima Efron, came up, and we call it Transcendence. And it's really cantorial music played in unison with the saxophone and the trumpet with this tapestry of rhythm and texture. And that was really nice experiencing cantorial music like that.
By the way, I don't think I ever told you this, Greg. My great-aunt, Nettie Rosenblatt, who died a few years ago just before her 101st birthday, was the daughter of Yossele Rosenblatt. And I love cantorial music and was interested in it at a fairly young age, listening to the recordings, and I found out this is an ancestor.
Wow.
I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
That's what they call yichus.
So it's an in-law, I have to say. She's an in-law, but still pretty amazing. She was an amazing woman, by the way, brilliant.
Yes, ma'am.
Where does John Zorn fit into this picture that you're giving us?
So John Zorn, I believe, coined the term radical Jewish culture, which seems to have stayed here. John, very interesting guy, and a real visionary, great composer. So he put together a group called Masada to play pieces that he wrote that were sort of informed by the sound of Jewish music. He's also into mysticism of all kinds. I just wrote an article for a journal he publishes every year called Arcana, which is a journal of mysticism. And I think if it's not out right now, it'll be out very, very shortly. So, but because Zorn is so iconoclastic, he was able to create opportunities for different types of performances. And he was probably the best known musician starting to play this radical Jewish culture. And then he started a record label called Tzaddik Records, which today...
He has some CDs on it.
Yeah, I have 2 under my own name. I'm working on a 3rd, and I'm on a bunch of others by friends of mine who are on the label. And, you know, John, it's a great label. He curates his label. He only records what he likes, which is nice. And a lot of people, you know, will, because he's the curator of the label, they trust him. And it's kind of nice when an artist has the trust of an audience that he can put out whatever he wants, and people are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And it's really nice. And he's chosen to document a lot of this new music, regardless of how many copies it sells. He just feels that it's important, and I believe that it's an important body of work. So I guess more than that, you'll have to ask John himself how he fits in.
Piece. We're getting to the end now. We have on the list here.
We'll get back to more questions in a second.
You can leave something out if you want. We had 3 left on there.
Okay. Okay. So there's another type of authentic Jewish music, if we're going to use the term, and I think maybe it could be, and I'm going on a limb, I don't know for sure, because I'm not a historian or musicologist, I'm just a music lover. But I think might be the oldest Jewish music that we have is the music that is used to chant the Hebrew Bible. And according to tradition, it's Sinai. It comes from something that's really, really old. They say, well, it might have come from Mount Sinai itself. Certainly very, very old. And it's a system of notation. Every word in the Bible has a melody to it. And
for those of you who don't know, it's before the staff notation that's used in Europe. It's a symbolic notation. You kind of have to memorize patterns, but the symbols do indicate the patterns.
So most people learn, or most Jewish men, and of the last part of the 20th century, Jewish women also who had bat mitzvahs, learned to, as part of this language, as part of the ritual of the bar bat mitzvah, where they would either chant from the scrolls themselves, or they would read a selection from the prophets that they call haftarah. So I had the requisite bar mitzvah when I was 13, and unfortunately, my exposure to this musical language was a tape that someone made for me. They said, here, learn this tape. And I just memorized it. And I had no idea that there was a musical language going on here with a notation symbol. So it wasn't until later on when I was interested in finding out about this, and I had a son who I was exposing to different kinds of music. I said, maybe we'll learn it together. I will learn this musical language, and I'll teach him. He must have been about 7 or 8 at the time. And I started learning the traditional trup, they call it, the melodies to go along with the chanting. And then it was only natural before I started to play it on my instrument. And I recorded a CD based almost completely on this whole experience. And there are different types of melodic material that share the same symbols, but depending on which context, there'll be different melodic material that are represented by it. So something that was very liberating for me, it's actually more than liberating, it's sort of like a repair. There's a concept in Judaism called a tikkun, a correction, a repair. And I felt that since my bar mitzvah was such a horrific experience for me, that by actually learning this musical language and creating art out of it, that could be sort of a tikkun. That could be sort of a healing of the whole experience. So, so I'm going to play a line from my actual bar mitzvah portion. And it was from the prophet Malachi, Malachi in Hebrew. And he says, Bein yechabed av, a son should honor the father. Ve'eved adonav, and a slave his master. V'im av ani, and if I am the father, of course this is the boss talking, aye kivodi. Where's my respect? Where's my honor? V'im adonim ani, and if I am and the master, aye morai. Where is my respect? Where's Amar Hashem Tzevaot, says the God, the master of hosts, Lachem HaKahanim, you priests, Bozei Shemi, you embarrass my name. This is strong language. I had no idea when I was 13 years old what I was saying at all. I just did it because I memorized the whole thing. Azinu et Shemecha, you, it's embarrassment to your name. So anyway, here's one of those, someone chanting that in the synagogue, that whole thing would have taken 5 seconds. But it was a nice way to relate to it. And so I wrote a bunch of pieces taking different verses, especially from the book of Ezekiel, which had some very wild imagery, and
What CD is that?
that's on the CD Later Prophets on Tzaddik Records.
Looks like
Yes, sir.
I have to get
Well, there's a big distinction. There's a different mode. Yeah, yeah. This was basically, just
Melodically
half
different.
drop.
Oh, I see.
So I don't play this text that way. It would sound completely different. And there's different ones they use for the Megillot are different. And anyway,
We have one more tune, right? one more piece of music, and then we'll call it a day. And why don't you tell them what this is that we're going to play?
Okay, yeah, we're
Should
going to
we
play.
take one more question before we do? Yes, ma'am. It's interesting. He's never talked about that.
Which repetition in particular?
Yeah.
I wonder if it had any effect on Philip Glass.
It could be. I don't know that he's ever talked
I mean, there's a
about
lot of repetition in the universe. I mean, we all, I'm serious, I mean, it's part of it. You know, if our heart didn't repeat, we wouldn't be here talking about this. And there are essential rhythms. So I think the idea of repetition is going to be inherent in anything.
Well,
and then as a,
could be.
and plus for emphasis, you know, anybody who has children know that if you don't say something at least 3 times, you never said it once at all. So there's
I don't know if that's music, though. But Glass, except you have to. Glass and Steve Reich have talked about African music as a source. But as you probably know, Steve Reich, in the past 20 years, has been doing Hebrew texts. So he's probably more consciously.
Now, Steve Reich did a wonderful project based on something like this. You know, if anybody who's familiar with the ta'amim, with the notes, will realize that there is a sequence of different note groupings that comes up a lot. And people who are expert in this, I'm not an expert, I'm a dabbler in it, but the people who are expert could know by the grammatical construction exactly what notes are going to be there. But if you ever look in a Tanakh, a Hebrew Bible, and you look at the book of Psalms, Sefer Tehillim, and you look at the sequence, it's completely bizarre. It's nothing like anything else that we have. And most people have no idea what that music is supposed to sound like. Now, there are some Yemenite Jews who have a tradition to, I don't know, you ever heard any of that? I'm not familiar with this language, but they have a tradition. I mean, it's just really bizarre. Nothing follows what it's supposed to. Things are in very, very interesting order. So Steve Reich did a piece on Tehillim where he actually was sort of experimenting with this and came up with, with his own language. It's really beautiful music.
There's a woman back there, I think, was waiting for a while. Is that you? Yeah. And this will be the last question. Then I'm going to play a tune. Yeah.
Would you say that most music that's klezmer or Hasidic is written in a minor key?
A lot of it, but not necessarily.
Quite a bit of it is. Yeah.
I mean,
or not necessarily what minor mode, but something that has the minor third in it. The rest of the scale could be different. So, for example, this is not a minor mode, but it has the minor beginning. It has the minor beginning.
It seemed kind of plaintive and romantic to me.
We'll go with
plaintive
that.
and romantic also could be just the way that it's played too.
It's true too.
But I mean, there's no absolutes. But I mean, there is in a Jewish context, minor does not necessarily mean set. So,
because it could be fast, it could be dance music. Okay, so what is this piece of music?
oh, the last piece, I want it's sort of a tribute to my new digs in the East Village. So my synagogue is between 1st and 2nd Avenues on East 6th Street, and on 2nd Avenue, there's a strip that used to have a lot of theaters that had Yiddish music on a regular basis. Last month, I was asked to participate in a night of interfaith music. We have an interfaith council in the area, and they get together. It's kind of nice that all the clergy get to know each other if there's an issue that needs support. So you're going beyond your own 4 walls, and people help each other out. And this was nice. There was music from just about every religious tradition and ethnic tradition you can imagine. So I decided to play a piece from the Yiddish theater, since this church where the concert took place was right on 2nd Avenue, the Intercollegiate Church on 2nd between 6th and 7th. So this is a Yiddish version of a theme that's very similar. Do you remember the little match girl that, was it Hans Christian Andersen tale or something like that? So this is a song called Paparosin. It's cigarettes. And somebody is selling cigarettes and matches to try to make a living, and business isn't too good. And it's not such a happy ending when it's freezing cold and you have no way to warm yourself up. So anyway, here's Papa Rosen, and the original recording had very simple chord progression to the melody. So I'm going to play the melody, but it works very, very well with a more modern jazz language. So.
And the tempo again?
We'll start off rubato, and then we'll go into tempo on the bridge.
I'll just follow you. Anybody who would like Greg Wall to be your rabbi, clap, whistle, shout, and scream at this moment. And thanks very much for coming.